was really interested that you have started your book with this chapter on purpose, and you're linking quite strongly the relationship between well-being and teachers having a sense of purpose. And I guess it's not always the starting point for people when they're talking about teacher well-being. So it'd be really interesting to I've got some ideas about teacher well-being and purpose as well, but I'd really love to hear from you why that area and why that first in the book.
So for me, that came from very early on in my career, when I was speaking to a mentor, and we had a colleague who was really struggling with the job, seemingly increasingly disillusioned, increasingly cynical, and we were wondering, what was going on, how we could support, whether this person was cut out for teaching, I remember the mentor said, "Scratch any teacher hard enough, and they're in it to make a difference." And I genuinely don't believe that there is such a thing as a lazy teacher. I genuinely don't. I don't believe that anyone gets out of bed in the morning to do a bad job. And sometimes I worry that we operate in a deficit model where we focus all our attention on the even better ifs and not enough attention on what is going really well, what is purposeful, what is wonderful about what we do. So for me, it was about getting right back literally to the heart of teaching. What is your why? Because we so easily, and again, the system we're in can mean, not always, but can mean that we lose sight of the very people we're in it for. So I have, in the course of my career, I've sat in meetings where children haven't been mentioned, for example. I've sat in day-long insets where children haven't been mentioned, and we lose sight. So for me, it's about going right, cutting through the nonsense, cutting through the risk assessments and the KPIs and the development plans and the schemes of learning, and saying, look, why are we here? What is our fundamental moral purpose?
Yeah, and I guess from my research, so I'm fascinated by what I and others call the science of well-being. So this is the kind of, psychological study of what contributes to people's flourishing, levels of health and well-being. And in my first book, I kind of use a definition of well-being that comes from the Children's Society that other organizations use as well. That well-being is made up of two main components. One is subjective well-being, so your sense of satisfaction with your life, your experience of positive and negative emotions, and your ability to kind of handle the full spectrum of emotions that you might experience. And the second aspect is psychological well-being, which is made up of your sense of purpose and meaning in life and your sense of engagement. And so with that model, without having a strong sense of purpose or feeling that what you are doing with your day-to-day kind of activities in life is in some way valuable and meaningful, then you will score low on well-being. And personally, I retrained to be a teacher in 2010, and before that I worked in music publishing. And again, in my first book, I wrote briefly about my experience of poor mental health. I went through a period of acute anxiety that led to a bout of depression, which is one of the main reasons I'm so passionate about mental health and well-being. But at that time, one of the things that was really getting me down was I felt like my life lacked meaning and purpose. Like, my job was just making music publishers richer, and I didn't feel like I was contributing to society in any meaningful way. And one of the reasons I got into teaching was I signed up for this mentoring scheme through a charity in London called Chance UK. I mentored a 9-year-old boy in Hackney that was being taught in a Peru. And that whole experience kind of changed my outlook. And I just thought, this is what I want to do with my time and my life. I want to contribute to young people's kind of futures in some really positive and meaningful way. And so, Emma and I decided to start with that chapter because we feel that, it's essential to keeping you on the right path in your teaching career, but also we know that having a sense of meaning and purpose is fundamental to your well-being. What about you, Angie? What are your thoughts on well-being and purpose?
I think it's so interesting. You've both touched on something that I'm exploring with quite a few of my coachees at the moment, in that we can, because I work with senior leaders, you kind of get to this point where you are often driven by things that are external, and it is really difficult. I think people forget that they started this career because of something internal, because of that intrinsic motivation to do something, as you say, to serve, to work with young people, to make a difference in people's lives. And increasingly the job seems to become an external thing. You know, you're driven by these external forces. And one of the things that I notice when I'm working with people who are feeling close to, I don't know if it's burnout, but certainly the kind of the fatigue that there can be sometimes around teaching and around leading, is that when you reconnect them to their why, like, why did you set out to do this? They can find that they are on a different path within the sector than they thought they would be on. And actually, it's a tweak to get back onto the path that they really wanted to be on. And that even knowing that inspires them with this sense of greater well-being, even if the road is really long, even if it's going to be a really hard journey back to the thing that they really wanted to do, they still feel this sense of well-being. And I think it's around agency. I think it's around feeling suddenly that you're the person in control of your why, nobody else is. And in a job that can be in which it can be quite hard to find agency, when you feel like you're dominated by external factors, that moment when you reconnect with why you're doing it. And you know, I was talking to an English teacher the other day, and she's now a CEO, and she's running a trust. And so actually there's a why there still, about passion for the word, for bringing children the word. And we had this amazing conversation about that why and how that can be manifest in her work. So I'm delighted to see you starting with purpose, because it feels like it's something we're all in control of, rather than something we have to find from somewhere else.